Okay, so what we have here today is a hazel tree, and this is sort of material that's very affordable for most enthusiasts. It can be picked up. This kind of stuff can be picked up at any sort of bonsai retailer, and we're going to look at some fundamental techniques for improving deciduous trees. Now, what's good about this material, although it's a bit sort of overgrown and looks a bit random, is that the branching structure of it is very, very deciduous-like. This has been left to sort of grow quite naturally, and so what we can see in this tree is a lot of natural deciduous-like growth. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the faults and the good points about the tree and base our decisions on those. So this long straight section here, this is a very, very youthful shoot. This is still only a couple of years old. And this is very, very straight, which is kind of out of keeping with the rest of the tree. So this is going to be quite a problem for us to sort of deal with. Other problems that we have, if we look around on this side, we've got some sort of unsightly knobs at the bottom. And this can either be made a character feature, or it's going to be something that we may have to sort of hide. Okay. Good points about the tree. As I said, we've got a lot of angular movement within the tree, so lots of changes of direction, and this is very good for a deciduous tree because this sort of represents age. So every year it grows in one direction, and then it changes, and then it changes again, and it changes. So having this kind of very angular movement is something which we should look to bring out. Okay, so when we first approach a piece of material like this, we have to identify the faults and also the good points as well. So whenever working with deciduous trees, we start from the bottom upwards. So looking at the root system, we can see that we've got one very, very strong root here and a couple of very strong roots there. The points that you should all be aware of is that quite often we get a piece of wire going across there to hold the tree. Now this should be avoided at all costs because what's going to happen is that's going to dig in, and so this tree is very solid in the pot, so we'll get rid of that. You can see there already it's beginning to dig in. Okay, so whenever you're repotting your trees yourself, always avoid that. Okay, so what we'll do is just have a dig around, get rid of some of this moss, and just make sure we don't have any other problems lying underneath. Okay, so now we've uncovered the base a little bit. There's no more major surprises. We do have quite an interesting little bit of deadwood down here, which again, with these lumps and gnarls here, could be made a feature of. Some people may look at that and being unsightly. Other people may look at that and think that's a very interesting natural looking feature. And natural looking is going to be a key word for this tree, because if we look up into the branches, one of the good points about it, as I said before, is kind of like the natural movement within them. Okay, so if we look at this branch as a good example, what we have here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 changes of direction, which for a deciduous tree is something very, very desirable. Every year it grows and then splits off into other directions, and so that sort of gives us a sense of age. If we compare that to this branch here, which is a bit of a problem for us, when we look here we just see this is bolt straight, and from the base up to the first branch here it's quite some distance, and so this is going to be an issue for us. So major faults within the branching structure is the straightness of this, the relationship between the two trunks, but the good points are we've got some very, very interesting deciduous-like movement. Figure out how best to accentuate that and how to get rid of some of those faults. So the first job that we're going to do is remove anything that is really, really obviously wrong, any major problems with the tree, and then figure out which sort of side we're going to use as the front, and then the branches that we're going to keep. So I've said this is a major problem, and so the only solution for that really is to get rid of it. And the best way to get rid of it, the best way to make any large cuts on deciduous trees is to use a saw. Okay, rather than using big branch cuts and things, using a saw gives you a lot more control, gives you a lot cleaner finish, and makes the wound heal over a lot quicker. So we'd recommend using a saw for this. So we're going to just cut through that initially. We're going to try and leave those two branches. This one's going to come off as well with it, and then we're going to clean up this knob here. The trick when using concave cutters is never to cut away too much at a time. Don't take massive mouthfuls, but just nibble away bit by bit. And that way we don't take away too much, we don't crack the wood, and we don't damage any of the branches underneath. Final job is just to smooth off all of the edges, just with a very sharp knife, and that enables it to begin to callus over. Now, what we do with the wound afterwards as well is very important, and the very minimum, what you should do is cover it with a wound sealant. Now I like to use Callus Mate. It's a Japanese brand. The reason being is it's paste like this and you can apply it very easily. It also has antifungal, antibacterial properties, so it's going to stop anything going in there. Quite a few brands on the market, Q&L, and there's also European brands which do exactly the same. And so this enables us to seal the wound, to stop anything bad from getting in, and stop any excessive moisture from escaping. We don't need to use lots of it, but we need to ensure that it's all entirely covered over, and that will assist with callousing. Another branch which is definitely going to have to go before you even start thinking about the design is this one here. You notice it's very, very long and straight, and also taking a good look at the tips of the branches here. We notice that a lot of them are dead, and if you're not sure if they're dead or not, then just gently, very, very gently sort of scrape the end and look at the colour underneath. If it's green, it's living. If it's white, it's dead. And if we look at the base of the branch, just take away some of the bark there, we can see that all of it underneath is dead. And so even if we really wanted to use this branch, it's very unlikely that we're going to get any back budding anywhere except for perhaps a tiny little live section on this side here. So because of the dead nature of this branch, or semi-dead nature of this branch, we're going to have to get rid of it. Now it comes to making a decision about this section that we have here. So in a very short section of the trunk, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 branches, and that's far too many for one area. If we allow all of those to continue growing, this area is going to get thick. Okay, and then we've got branches sort of covering the same sort of space. Now really we need to make a decision about which of these two we're going to use to become our apex. Now, fundamental design idea is that we should always try and use the most interesting natural branch that we can, as long as it's in a very good position. Now, if we compare those two together, we've got this one with a little bit of movement in here, and then a very, very sort of straight section and quite a large node here, compared to this branch here, which has got considerably interesting movement, lots of changes of direction. Okay, so this one is a more interesting branch. Now we've decided that this is more interesting. Now we need to look at it from various different angles to see if we can actually use that as a main line up the trunk. Okay, so looking at it from this side, we've covered up that the less interesting branch in there, and we can see already here we've got quite an interesting line up into the apex. And with perhaps the removal of that branch there, then we've definitely got a front that's worth considering here. Now if we turn it around and look at it from the other side, okay, with the removal of that, we can't actually do it. If we follow the trunk line up, we come to this section, and if we're going to use this as our main line, then we've still definitely got something that's worth considering as a front here. And again, we're probably going to need to remove that. So we've definitely got two design options that are worth considering after removing this. Okay, so let's initially just cut that off there and then see where we stand. We've still got one branch too many in this section here. Central front, because remember we still haven't exactly decided where we're going to go. And if we use this branch, just pull that across to fill in some space there. This has definitely got some use. But then if we look at this one, compared to these two. They're sort of all competing for the same space. This one's very, very straight, so from this front, it's not a good branch. Spinning it around, looking here. This branch, although it's not as ideally placed, we can still sort of bring that towards the front to make something a little bit more interesting. And this one is still sort of competing against those two branches there. Okay, and so this one really is unnecessary. So let's get rid of it. Here, where we've got 1, 2, 3 branches coming from one node, and we need to decide which of those we're going to remove. Now obviously we can't remove this one, this is going to be our main line, so which of those two is best related to it, and also the other branches around it. Now if we choose those two, we've got quite a large separation there, that angle becomes obtuse. Okay, we get a massive separation in between those two. These two are very, very close, this is straight up, but still that is a better relationship than the obtuse angle there. So if we remove this one, are we going to end up with a lot of space in here? Not really, because we've got this branch which is going to be able to sort of fill in that space, and once that has leaves on it, a bit more ramification, then this area here isn't going to feel quite so empty. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep this upward growing branch. So again, that is very much in keeping with the natural looking style of this tree, of a deciduous tree where all the branches tend to grow up initially. So now we've dealt with this side of the tree, we're going to come back to this section here. Now, we need to decide on our front now. And if we look at it from this side, as we look at this second trunk here, because of the thickness of this compared to the taller of the two branches, our eye is definitely drawn towards this. And this becomes an issue because the branching up here gets lost. Okay. However, if we turn it around and begin to look at it from somewhere in here, because the thinner trunk or thinner branch here is in the foreground, our eye tends to go up on there more than the thicker branch at the back. So although we have a visible scar here, this is a much more usable front in terms of the relationship between those two. Okay, obviously, as we just sort of discussed, all the branching on this side is equally visible from either side, and so purely on the relationship between these two here, and also all the other features, then we're going to be looking at the front somewhere in here. Now, a lot of people will look at this and say that this is quite unsightly, but really for the natural looking feel to this trunk, to this tree, then this is going to add some interest. Okay, so now we come to this section here. Now, we've got a very, very sort of strong straight line here, and so if we look at the branch with that removed, where we come here, then we've got a very nice dramatic change of direction, and then another dramatic change of direction. That's much more attractive than this long straight line, followed by another straight line up in here. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just take that off. Okay, and we also want to get rid of this tiny little bud that's growing off the bottom there. Okay, now we've got quite a lot of foliage up here, and very few branches along this section. But what we do have is a node here and here where we have lots of buds, and we'll get budding coming from here. So within a year we're going to have branches here, here and here. Okay. We've still got a few too many branches up in this section here, so what we'll do is just get rid of that one. Okay, and then just shorten this down. Okay, so just by following a few simple principles there, we've ended up with a tree that just by pruning alone, we've got a very believable natural image here. Okay, there are a few areas that we're going to look to correct by wiring. As I mentioned before, what we're going to look to do is just perhaps bring this branch over here, maybe lower this one, and just bring those across a little. Now, because we've gone for a very natural looking style and we've looked to accentuate this angular movement, what we don't want to do is wire up the branches and then put movement in between the nodes. So for example, I do not want to wire this here and then put a bend in this section. I want to maintain the straightness of this section, because although we've been removing long straight lines, what we want to try and keep are those short internode lengths straight. So we're going to be able to move that here, but we don't want to put curves in here. Okay, similarly, we're going to look to bring this down. In the future, if we want to introduce other changes in direction, we'll do that by pruning. Okay, so it's going to be a very sort of sensitive way of wiring. So we're not looking at putting lots of cranks in it, we're just looking at moving branches. So if we have a branch here, we're not looking at bending it, bending it, bending it. What we're looking at doing is just perhaps moving it as a whole. Okay, so this is the tree finish now for today. We applied a minimum amount of wire in order to move the branches into a little bit more of a desirable position. And this is a good example of what can be achieved by applying very, very simple, fundamental, basic design.